Hello friends, welcome to Edwiki Learning channel. Please do subscribe to get more updates on the DevOps concepts. This video is part of the full course AWS DevOps Practitioner training. Please do check the description below to get the link for the complete full course. Without further delay, let's get into the video. Thank you. Welcome back team, and let's get started with today's discussion. So by now we have done with EBS volumes and how do we use the EBS volumes to store our specific business specific data, right? So when it goes to the real time based on the requirement, a EC2 instance may have one volume or maybe number of multiple additional EBS volumes. It's all based on the requirement, right? So I would like to call out that whatever we are discussing as of today, just try to grab that technical concept rather thinking about how this is being utilized in the real time. Okay. So as I already noted in previous lectures, right, as and when our sessions are going and discussing about the further advanced concepts, the process will keep changing. The best practices are keep on adding, right? So the way how we are using these concepts, it could be a EBS, could be a EC2, could be any other, right? So all these, how exactly we are using it in the real time, that process will be keep changing as and when we are going into the advanced sessions case. Got me? So that's the reason, rather worrying about how this is being used in the real time at this point of time, right? Better grab the technical concept, keep this as a kind of a basic ready, and when we go to the next level, right, we will definitely talk about the enhancements, and then I'll talk about the final stage, how it is in real time exactly. Make sense, guys? I hope we are on same page. Well, thank you for the acknowledgement on the chat window. Now let me come back to the story. Well, so I'm going to start with the concept called AWS IAM today, and we'll talk about what is this AWS IAM and the advantages with this. Okay. So before I get into there, okay. So currently I logged into my AWS management console using the root account, right? Even if I do a sign out here, so usually I'll go to this aws.amazon.com, then click on sign in, and this is where there are two different type of logins that it is asking. And as of today, right, so far we are using this root user, and give the registered email ID over there and login, right? The email ID that I have used here to logging into my AWS account is the email ID which was used to create a account on this AWS account. Okay, so if you logging into the AWS using that email ID, that email ID login is considered as a root account, right? So if you log in to the AWS using the root account is like a super account, right? So it has a complete administrative access on this AWS account in the sense, right? This login has complete access. It can create a EC2 server, delete a like terminate a EC2 server, right? Create a volume, delete a volume. All the permissions are granted. Not only EC2, whatever the different services that you see in this list, right? Now I can go and access all these different services. When it goes to the real time, right? In real time, this not as of now, this AWS account is created by yourself to do the practice by you itself, right? No one else will be using your AWS account, correct? You only logging in, you do your lab practice, and you take care of. When it comes to the real time, this is not the case, right? A single AWS account is now being accessible by multiple people within the team, correct? So if the team, if the DevOps team or any cloud team, right? If the team has multiple people in it, all these people are logging into the same AWS account to do some job related activities, correct? If that is the case, we cannot give this root email ID and the password information to all of the team members to logging into the AWS for various reasons. The very first reason, right? I don't want to give the complete super user access to all of my team members, correct? Because the users can even can go on to delete a easy to instance, right? So I don't want that to be happen. So the requirement here is based on the job responsibility, the engineer need access to which services and what level of services, right? Like what kind of the actions that the user has to do on the AWS account to fulfill his job responsibilities. We need to give the access to only certain limited things, right? So that's the reason we will never ever use this root account logins in the real time to access the AWS. Also, here we see that there are n number of different services that the AWS is offering. All the services are actually right applicable for different sectors, right? In the sense you see here some robotics, right, and media services, right, and you can see something called development. We really don't deal with all of these, right? We as a cloud engineer or a SRE engineer or a DevOps engineer, whatever the role, right? We are not dealing with all of this. So why should I give this permission to the engineer, right? So that's the reason. So AWS has come up with the concept called IAM. IAM is the Identity Access Management concept. The AWS IAM, right, will enable the way how we can create a individual user accounts for each and every engineer whoever need access to my AWS account to fulfill the job responsibilities and limit the access. So we have the full control, right, to grant the access to each and every individual user, right, what that the user can do on the AWS in a way, right? So if you come to this particular presentation just to get some insight about the AWS IAM, right? So initially it will be little confusing guys, definitely, because from today onwards the things will be going at least to the next level, little advanced, right? So I would say like so far whatever is done, those are level 1 category, and from now onwards whatever we are trying to discuss will be like a level 2. So the complexity will be little increased from today onwards guys. Okay, so the AWS is actually maintaining the whole infrastructure resources in their data centers, right? That's what we are calling it as a cloud. Okay, there is a AWS cloud where the infrastructure is available as a service model, right? And to utilize these AWS services, what we are doing as of today, like we are using the AWS management console, right? And from this AWS management console, which you are accessing from your browser, right? You are able to connect to your AWS, right? And utilize the services, correct? So you see here, so far we have used the root login to access the AWS using the management console, right? Which is not a best practice. Why? The root has complete access and it's not safe basically to give this root access to my employees, right? So accidentally, right, someone may delete something, right? That's the reason. So the IAM is the one of the AWS service. I believe this is the third service that I'm discussing in AWS. We discussed about EC2 service, Then we talked about Route 53 service, right? Now this is the third service. So the IAM service, Identity Access Management Service, will give us the flexibility to create a IAM user, right? IAM user, so that rather logging into the AWS using root account, now you logging in with the IAM user. Let's say in my team, if there are 5 engineers working for this project, right? Then I will be creating a total 5 IAM users. Each user will have their own username, their own password. So all these people are using their own credentials to logging into the AWS. It's a single AWS account again, but everyone has their own username password to logging in. That way we can control who can have what level of access on my AWS. The lead may have a different access, the engineer may have a different access, the manager may have a different access, right? So the user, whoever is accessing the AWS, right, to manage this infrastructure resources, the user can access via the AWS Management Console, which we are doing so far from the browser, or it is even possible to access the AWS using the command line interface. Like the user can run some commands to connect to the AWS and configure everything. So if the user is accessing the commands to access the AWS, that is called as a command line interface, right? And that is also called as a programmatic access. So I think you don't worry about the SDK tools here. The SDK tools in the sense it is possible to access your AWS account using any other third-party softwares as well. That is where I referred it as a SDK tools. We will know what does it mean by the SDK tools in upcoming. But for now, let's focus only on the command line interface. Or at high level terminology, we'll call it as a programmatic access. That means if you want to logging into the AWS, you have two options. Option one, console access. That is where you go to the browser and give your username and password and login. The second option is programmatic access, right? So the programmatic access is like a command line based login to your operating to your AWS, and whatever you do in the management console access from your browser, all those operations can be done from your command line access as well, but we need to familiar about the AWS commands, like how you guys managing your Linux operating system using Linux commands. Same way the AWS has their own set of commands, and we can use those commands to access AWS and configure everything from the CLI mode, right? So whenever the user is accessing either through console or through programmatic way, right? So now we need to control, right? The user can do what on my AWS. So that is where we need to have certain permissions checklist, right? You define some set of permissions for each individual IAM user, saying that this user can do this user cannot do this. You define certain things based on the job responsibility, right? The permissions that you are defining and configuring to your IAM user, those permissions are called as a IAM policy from the AWS terminology perspective. That means I'm going to create a IAM policy. The policy has certain set of permissions, and those permissions will now be attached to your IAM user. Like I'll create a IAM policy document, some set of instructions, and that I'm going to attach to the IAM user, so that whenever that user is trying to access your AWS, right, whichever the permissions are granted in the IAM policy configuration, only those actions can be done by that particular user, not more than that. In the IAM policy, if I mention that, hey, you cannot terminate a EC2 server, then when the user logging into the AWS, when he try to terminate a server, the server cannot go for termination. It will throw the error because that is not granted in your policy. That's how it is. So in this whole presentation, right, if you ask me what is important, the IAM policy, right? Because IAM policy is the configuration where you exactly define the level of permission and which service needs to be accessible by which user. Sorry, uh, which services will be accessible, right? So how efficiently you define or configure or develop a IAM policy, right? And we can secure your AWS account in that way, right? So sometimes, if I have some 5 members, 5 engineers in my team, right? So all the engineers would need a same access, right? Most of the cases, correct? So if you are thinking that, hey, these 5 engineers are working for same project, same team, would need a same set of permissions, then rather you attaching a policy to the IAM user, you can attach a policy to the group and you add all the users into the group. Like more or less we talked about this type of scenario in the Linux level as well, right? At a OS level, same thing. So you put all the users into the group, whichever the users that you feel that part of the same team would need a same set of permissions. Then you create a group and attach a policy to the group. Then that policy permissions will be applicable to all the users. Good. So now let me go ahead and show you how the things will work out here. So for now, I just have logged into this AWS account as a root account, right? Obviously, the very first time when we create a or when we register a account in AWS, right? Obviously, we need to logging in as a root account only, right? So the first time when we set up this AWS account, we logging in as a root account. Now, as a root account, let me go ahead and create a IAM user from this IAM service. So I'll just go to this IAM, right? So this is the IAM dashboard, guys. And in the IAM dashboard, in the left side, you see that the IAM resources like users, policies, and so on, so on. For now, let me go to this. Yeah, I think let me go to this policy section. So here you can see almost 1,000+ number of policies. All these policies are actually the configuration, right, which defines what is the level of access and for which services. Okay, so AWS is making your life easier by giving you the AWS managed policy. You see here all these are the policies. The type says AWS managed, in the sense the AWS has already created a policy for you. The policy has a policy name and the small description saying that this particular policy will give you what kind of the permission on your user, and that's the description. So based on the job requirement, which policy will be more suitable for that particular user, you need to go and choose that particular policy. Let's say as an example, I have got a new engineer joined in my project, right? And now I need to give the AWS login for that engineer to get start with this job, right? The day one when he joined, maybe I don't want to give him the complete access on my AWS just because I don't know his capability. He may go and delete one of the EC2 server accidentally, and that will be a loss because if the server gets terminated, my website is down and my business is down, right? So maybe initially the day one when he joined, maybe I want to give the read-only access. You see this policy, I'm just searching for this, right? So there is one policy that says that Amazon EC2 read only access. That is the name of the policy, right? And the policy description says that it is giving you the read only access to Amazon EC2 servers. That means this policy will enforce that the user can only see the running EC2 servers and the metadata of the EC2 server, but the user cannot stop the server, cannot terminate a server, right? And cannot do any writing operations on that. So like that, we need to search for the policy and see which policy will be more suitable for your job need. Let's say I wanted to control the user can do what on my Route 53. Search for Route 53 and you will see a number of policies that you see here, right? And we need to see the description and take a decision which policy is more suitable for that particular engineer, right? For as per his job responsibility. Let's say you see here Amazon Route 53 full access. This policy will give the complete access on the Route 53. That means a user can create a record, delete a record, create a hosted zone, anything can be done. But whereas if you see the read-only access, it will give you the limited access. He can't go and delete something like this. So like that, there are multiple policies that you see here. Each policy has its own meaning or the conditions. So we need to go through that and see which one will be more suitable. For now, let me work on the EC2 policy just to get start with this. By looking into the policy name, how do we know that this policy is enforcing what level of permission on my AWS, right? Because this description is not enough for me, right, to understand what it is doing. So if you do this, if you click on this plus symbol, right, you'll get more configuration information. You see below, right, how this policy is configured. That configuration you can see here in the below. This is a small kind of the editor, and where you can see the configuration. The configuration of this policy is in the form of a JSON, right? Like usually any configuration, like any configuration will have its own syntax, correct? Syntax in the sense of format, right? So each application will have their own rules, how the configuration has to be in a file, then only the application can understand. Got me? So here the policy configuration should be in the JSON syntax, and this is the JSON document, right? So the JSON is very simple language, I would say, right, which is used to format a text in a way, right? So the JSON format will have the key value pair kind of. You see here, the left side is the key colon, the right side is the value. Key colon value, key colon value. That's a general JSON structure. So the JSON always should be started with a curly brace, and it has to be right close using that curly brace. So any configuration that you are keeping in the JSON structure, right, it should start with a curly brace, it should end with a curly brace, and inside that again you see here, like start with a curly brace, close with a curly brace, something like this. But for now, I'm not going too much information about what is this JSON, how it is. I will just wanted to understand, right? This policy will give us what kind of the permission. You see here, the effect is the key that says that the permission you are trying to allow or deny. Action is the key that will tell that what is the action that you are trying to allow to that user. And you see the action here, EC2 colon describe star. That means describe is the action that you wanted to give to the user. Describe in the sense what in general, a English terminology perspective, describe in the sense view access, read access, right? That means the user can read a EC2 instance information, right? That's what it is. Do I need to allow the read access for all the EC2 instances running in this account or a specific EC2 instance? Correct? Again, if I have some 10 EC2 instances running, should I give the access for all the 10 EC2 instances or only for a specific EC2 instance? I can control that as well, right? So that is what is called as a resource key. The resource key, whenever it is saying star, star refers everything. So this particular policy statement meaning is, right, give the describe access for all the EC2 instances. Why I'm saying give? Because the effect is allow. If the effect is deny, there is the negative permission, like, hey, don't give the permission for this. That's how it is. Like that, you can see a few more statements below. Like overall, any policy will have the effect, action, resource. For which resource that you wanted to give, and you want to deny or allow, or and what kind of the access that you wanted to give. That's how it works, guys. Right? So for now, that is good enough information to understand what is the policy and how the policy is being constructed. All these are already prepared by AWS for you, and hence these are called as a AWS managed policies, right? We just need to go and choose the one which is more suitable for our job need. Good. So now what I do is, after having some information about what is policy, I will go to the user section here. Now let me go ahead and create one new user for the engineer who is joined and wanted to have access to this AWS to start with this job responsibility, right? So here I can give the username over there. Maybe I'll just, sorry guys. So I'll just give the username. Maybe I'll just go with okay. So I'm just using any other name. So I'm just using a username called SM. So here we see that provide user access to a console. So you want to give the console access to this user, then do the check mark, right? Now just come down. So we can ignore these options for now. Okay, sorry. So select this option. I want to create a IAM user, right? This is what I'm trying to do at this time. Do not worry about the identity center option at this time. You choose a IAM user. Now I want the password to be generated automatically. That's okay. Now the user must change the password at first time login, right? So it's best practice to check this mark. That way, like I am creating the user, right? Definitely once the user is created, I know what is the password, right? It's not a best practice to know the password of the other users, right? So if you enable this option, when that engineer is logging in at the very first time, he can change the password himself, and so that I'll not know what is the new password, right? So that's the reason. Go to next. Now this is where we need to set up permissions. This user can do what on my AWS account. So the permissions can be given in multiple ways. For now, let me get started with the third option, which is attach policies directly. This is where you can see all the 1000 plus number of policies in the drop down, the same policies that I have shown you some time back. Now search for the policy which you wanted to give to the user. Let's say I want to give the Amazon EC2 read-only access. Select it. Now go to next. That's it. Now just go and create a user. Now you see that the username and the password is generated here, and this is the console sign in URL, guys. So just click on download a CSV file. so that this username and the password and the link, everything will be downloaded to your local machine using the Excel formatted file like CSV file. So once this file is downloaded, this is the file that I'm going to send to the engineer. Hey, these are your credentials for logging into the AWS. So if I open this sheet, right, the one which is downloaded, I can see a username, I can see a password, and I can see a console sign in URL as well. Okay, so now just click on return to user list. I'm done. So now there is one more user got created, right? So I will log out here. I will click on login one more time. Now I will log in with the IAM user, right? So here you can select IAM user. If you select IAM user, then it is asking you, hey, tell me your account ID or account alias name. If you know account ID, that is fine, or else you need to give the account alias name. I'll show you how to set a alias name as well. For now, let me come back and see this console login URL. In this URL, whatever the name that you see before the sign in, right, this is called as a alias username. So that is your account name basically, right? So here Edwiki-prod, that is the name of my AWS account. So that is the name that we need to give here and just go for next. Or else, right? So this is like if you go for aws.amazon.com and manually if you wanted to fill up this account ID or the alias, then this is the approach. Or else we can directly copy this whole URL because you got this sign on URL, right? If you use that URL directly, the account name will be auto-filled. You see here, the name is auto-filled. Now it is just asking, hey, give me your username and password. The username is SM. Now this is the password. You see that it is asking for changing the password. Let me give the old password and let me give the new password. Now I logged into this AWS account using IAM user, and you can see here the SM user is logged into the Edwiki prod account. That's how we can see this. Now already started some access denied errors because this user is limited, right? Help me guys in the chat window. This user can do what on this AWS account? Only the EC2 will be accessible, that too the read-only access. This user cannot go to Route 53 to do something, right? If I go to the Route 53, yeah, so even I'm not getting any option to see the things here. I wanted to go to Route 53. Yeah, you see that I'm getting error here because I don't have access to see all of this information. Now, if I go to EC2, let me see the running servers. That's fine. I don't have any servers. If the servers are there, then I can see the server and the information, but I can't do any writing operation. I can't stop the server. I can't reboot the server. I can't launch the server as well. For example, if I try to launch a server here, I will just go to launch. Let me fill up some options. I just wanted to show you, right, how these policies are enforced. I'm trying to launch a EC2 instance on this AWS account, and this is the error that you get it, right? The instance is failed, and it's very important to read this error, guys. If you see the error, you are not authorized to perform this operation, a user, and this is the username, is not authorized to perform a EC2 colon create security group. That means what? Right? It is trying to create a security group as part of this, and there is no permission to create a security group. This is fine, but why it is saying that the user and the username is like this? You see the username, guys? It says ARN colon AWS colon IAM colon something something. But at end I can see the username. So the AWS will identify any resource that is being created in AWS with the help of the ARN ID, right? Even the IAM user, the one which I created just now, is called as a resource, right? Correct? The IAM user is the resource of IAM service. Hope you are able to understand the terminology called resource and the service. Every service will have some set of resources in it, right? The IAM user is the resource in the IAM service. So any resource that you create in the AWS will have the ARN naming convention, guys. This is how the AWS will understand or identify this particular resource. For example, maybe with the name called SM, right? With the same SM name, there will be a IAM user, there will be a no, EC2 server, there will be a Route 53 record, there will be something else as well, right? Hope you get me. So if you are using the same name across your AWS account in multiple places, how it know exactly you are referring the user or a record or volume or EC2 server, correct? That is the reason to avoid the conflict. Every resource will have the ARN naming convention. The ARN naming convention, right, is followed like this: ARN colon AWS colon, then the service name, your resource is part of which service, that service name will be there, then colon colon, then your account ID. So this is my AWS account ID, right? Colon, then what kind of the resource it is, this is a user, slash, then the username. This is how AWS will take care of creating a ARN for every resource that you are creating. That's the reason it is giving you the complete path of your ARN, guys. Make sense, right? So like that, the ARN ID will be generated by the AWS in the backend automatically for you, and it know how to use this ARN. We will be not generating this ARN ourselves, or we are not using this ARN directly for most of the reasons. It just take care of. But I'm explaining this because we should understand why this type of the error is coming up here. Good. Now let me cancel this because I don't have any access here, right? So since this IAM user does not have much permissions, right? So probably uh, I can't do anything else. But I have shown you the sorry, I have told that the user can access the AWS using a programmatic access and the console access. This is called as a console access, guys. If this user want to access the AWS using the CLI, then the user can go to his account. A user can go to security credentials tab here, right? So here, interesting. You see here, even I don't have access to generate a programmatic level of permissions. That's fine, right? So I'll create it from the root account now. I'll sign out here. I will sign in here. Now I don't want to log in as IAM user. Let me click on sign in using root. Give the email ID and the password. A question for you at this time. Let's say you join into a new company, right? Now tell me guys, who will be creating a IAM user for you? Someone has to create a IAM user for you, right? Then you use that username and password and you logging into the AWS, right? So who will be creating it for you? When I say who, right? Do you think the one who is having the root permission will be creating a account for you? Now let me navigate to IAM. So here I logged in as a root permissions, right? No one will have the root permissions in the company except the company owner. Let me put it that way, right? So what we do, right? In the IAM section, right? I will create a another user, and this user I'm calling it as a admin, and I'm giving the access to this user. I want to create a IAM user. My username is admin, basically. So let me go next and attach a permissions directly. So here you can see that administrator access is the another policy that you see in the list, right? Administrator access is the IAM policy which has the complete permissions on my AWS except certain account related changes. I mean to say like changing the account address, mailing address, some sort of sensitive information, right? Except those, right? The all the permissions will be given for this administrator access. If you want, you can look into the policy document and see here. It's a very simple document, 10 lines. What it says, allow all actions on all resources. That's it. I'm not restricting anything, right? So this is called as a administrator access. I'm giving this administrator access to this particular user and I will go ahead and create a user, right? I will download this file. So this administrator access, let's say I will give this login to a team lead or to a manager. Let me put it that way, right? So now whenever you logging in, sorry, whenever you join to the company, right, you need a new account. So whoever is having this admin permission, that guy will log in as a IAM user and will be creating your account. Are we good with this? That means no one will use the root account to create a IAM user for you. No, even the one who is creating a IAM user will be logging in as one of the IAM user only, but that user has the administrator policy attached so that that user having a permission to create a one another IAM user as well. That's how it works. So in any company, there will be some set of people who are acting as a administrator role, and those guys will have this permission, and those people will be creating the IAM users whenever someone is joining into your project, guys. So the very first time when these admins are getting created, the root account will be creating one. Then onwards, that admin account will be taken care of creating any other additional IAM users as needed. So far, so good. Perfect. For now, let me cancel here, right? So I'll just go to the user section again and let me go to this SM user. And in the SM user, I can go to the security credentials tab. And here you can see that the access key concept. So access key and the secret access key. There are two keys that would be needed to connect it to the AWS using a programmatic way, guys. In order to generate the AWS access keys, you just need to click on create access key. And it is now asking you, hey, why do you need a access key? It is just trying to ask you, what is the purpose why you are creating an access key? In At this time, I need the access key to access the AWS using command line interface. So select that option and confirming that, go to next and click on create access key. Now you will be getting one access key and the secret access key. You see the two values. So this access key, secret access key are the unique IDs that are generated for this particular SM user only. And it is possible to use these keys to connect to our AWS using CLI. So let me download the file so that the file will contain those access key and secret access key. Now click on done. Well, so now let me show you how to access AWS using the keys. I'm opening this a CSV file that is downloaded, which has the access key and secret access key. Yeah. Now you see here, this is the access key and this is the secret access key. So from my laptop, right, sometime back I have used the browser to access my AWS, right? Now I'll do what? In my laptop, I'll just search for the command line. Even your Windows has a command line, right? So I'll just open my command prompt. This is the Windows command prompt. So here I need to run the command called AWS configure. AWS configure is the command which is used to set a access key and the secret access key. Just hit enter. AWS configure is not a Windows command, guys. This is the AWS command. Okay. So now it is asking for the access key. Let me give the access key. Now it is asking for secret access key. Let me give the secret access key. Now it is asking for, hey, which region that you wanted to access by default, US East 1. Now it is asking, hey, what is the output format that you are expecting? So you can go with the default for now. Done. Once you set up your access key and secret access key using this AWS configure command, now onwards, I can run AWS commands here to interact with the AWS case. Let's say I wanted to know the number of EC2 instances that are currently in my AWS account. Now I need to run the command. If it is a browser, so easy, right? I can just search for the EC2 service in my browser, right? If it is the console access, just search for the EC2, click on instances. Now you see that, hey, there is one server is currently running. But how do you see the number of servers that are currently running using the CLI mode? You need a syntax, right? So that is where now you need to depend on the command line documentation. AWS CLI reference guide. So I need to get into the AWS CLI documentation, and this is where it will tell you how to use the AWS CLI and how to pass the commands, arguments, all this stuff. And you see here the available services. The AWS is available for which service. For now, let's say I wanted to work on EC2. Search for EC2. Yes, this is the service that I wanted to. Inside the EC2 service, right? What is that you wanted to do? You see all these are the different commands that are available in this EC2 service. All these are the commands. And at this time, I just wanted to list my EC2 servers, right? So search for the command, which command will be more suitable for your need. There are many, guys. So, right, mostly I'll go for Control F, right? Let's say list. No, there is no luck. Let's say describe. Right? You see somewhere here describe hyphen instances. Maybe this is more suitable. Click on the command. Now it will give you more information what this command is doing actually. And you see that describes the specified instance or all instances. Yes, this is what I'm trying to look for. That is how, yes, you need to look into the documentation and see which command will be helping you to get the information. Now this documentation will tell you how to use this particular command, guys, and what and all different arguments that can be given to this particular command. Based on your requirement, see how to give all these arguments and go with this. And here it is explaining how to use the argument and how to give the value for that. Everything is documented. Yes, we need to follow this documentation to frame a command. For now, let me run a simple command. The command will be like this: AWS, a service name, then the command name, then the argument. Right? Let me run like this. AWS, I want to interact with the EC2, and my command is describe hyphen instances. Hit enter. Right? So I got output, guys. Okay. So whenever you run this command, right, what's happening behind the screen? This command is actually log into the AWS using the access key, secret access key that you supplied some time back, and will get the response from there. And since this is the command line interface, it can't give you the fully graphical user interface output, right? It is giving the output in the form of a JSON. So as of now, my output is a little empty because I don't have any EC2 instances that are currently running in my AWS, right? So maybe I think that's fine. Let me try to create a EC2 server. As of now, I don't have any EC2 instances. It says that empty. So let me try to create a server, guys. Help me, guys, how to create a server now? Using CLI. I don't want to use this console now. I want to use the CLI method. Again, go into the documentation, select the EC2. Now look for the command that is to create a server. Now run hyphen instances is the command which will help you to create a server. You see that it is going to launch a server. Look for the documentation, see how to make the things. For now, let me prepare a command, guys. AWS, I want to interact with the EC2. The command is run hyphen instances. Usually, when you are creating the EC2 server from the console, it's very easy, right? I can go and fill up this form, correct? As part of this, you need to tell which instance type, which AMI, which key pair, correct? The same input now I need to give in my CLI as well, correct? So the console is username and password based authentication. The command or the CLI is access key and secret access key based authentication, right? Let's see how to give the arguments here. The documentation says that hyphen hyphen image hyphen ID, right? This is the argument that we need to use to give the image ID. Okay, let me take that. I'll copy this. AWS EC2 run hyphen instances. Somehow the copy paste is not working, guys. What I do is rather me using this Windows CMD, let me use the command line like Linux based terminal. In my laptop, yes, though it is a Windows system, I have the bash terminal as well. It should work any command line. AWS EC2 run hyphen instances. Yeah, hyphen image ID space. Then we need to give the image ID over there. So let me go back to AWS. Somewhere I can find the image ID here. Copy that image ID, put it here, space. Now, if you wanted to supply all other parameters, right, you should know what is the argument that you need to use, right? So you need to follow the documentation, guys. You see here, hyphen instance type. Let me give that, let's say t2 dot micro. Now let me look into the documentation again. I wanted to give the key, right? Hyphen key underscore name is the parameter to give the key pair name. And I think my key pair is dpt hyphen 11. Let me verify the key pair name, guys, from the console. It's gonna be tricky in CLI. Not like you get some drop down and select it. No, dpt11 is my key, right? Like that, whatever you wanted to supply, yes, identify the parameter and give the value and you hit enter, right? So I got some output. The output says that, hey, you are not authorized to perform this operation. Why? The reason is the the user that I'm using here, whichever the user, right, is not authorized to perform this particular operation because that permission is not granted over there. Obviously, right? So that means though the user is logged in via the console or from the CLI, either the way, at end of the day, same user. So same permissions will be applicable there. That I wanted to show you, right? So it is not granted. Now, if we give the permission at IAM level, then the user can, run the command and can create it as well, guys. Right? So whenever you run this command, let's say AWS configure, right? So whenever you run this command, like you see here, it is showing the existing ID already. The reason is you do this, right? Whenever you run this command, it is going to save this information somewhere in the local system, guys. Let's say here currently I'm using this AWS configure command on my Windows system, right? So it will go to Windows systems home directory, maybe somewhere in the C colon, somewhere in the users section, somewhere in the users folder, right? This is my home directory, right? In my Windows. So it will go to .aws folder and there is a file called credentials. In this credentials file, those access key, secret access key will be get saved. If I open that file in my notepad, you should be able to see those access key and secret access key in the plain text format, guys. Don't worry about the other keys that I have here. I configured it for other reasons, right? You can see the keys in a plain text format, guys. So that means using this access key, secret access key as AWS configure command method is not a best practice because the keys are saved in the plain text format here. Every time when you run AWS commands, it will come to this file, read these keys, then connect it to AWS and do the things. So if someone know my access key, secret access key, even they also can put these keys in their machines and can run AWS commands. As long as the internet is there, it should work, guys. So it's not a best practice, but yeah, I'm explaining what is these keys and how to set up the keys for now. Are we good with this? So let's say I have the AWS infrastructure in the cloud somewhere, and me as a user, I wanted to use this AWS, right? So the user can go with the console-based login. That is where the username and password will be required. The user can go for a CLI-based login as well. That is where it need a access keys. Are we good with this? So this user can run like the console login is very straightforward. I don't want to talk about that. If it is a CLI, right? This user can run the CLI on any system that he like it, correct? As long as the system has the internet connectivity, right? It should work, right? So the question here is, can this user run the AWS commands on the EC2 server itself? Obviously, yes, right? I meant to say the AWS EC2 describe instances, AWS EC2 run instances, whatever the CLI that I used some time back in my local system, right? The user can run the same commands on the EC2 server as well. So a user is running the commands in the EC2 server to create another EC2 server. Make sense? Possible, right? So when I'm running the commands inside a EC2 server, that is the operating system, right? And usually AWS is not controlling your operating system, right? So you can run the commands everywhere, wherever you wanted to, even inside the EC2. So the requirement here is sometimes you may need to run the commands inside the EC2 server as well to control the AWS resources. That's what I'm trying to. Then the way how you set up the access key, secret access key in your local system, same way you need to set up the access key, secret access key in your EC2 server as well. I'll show you what does it mean by. So for that, I just need one EC2 server, guys. Let me go ahead and create one server. Currently, I logged in as a root account, so I have access to create a server. Right? So the thing is, now I wanted to run AWS commands here, like AWS EC2 describe instances. I wanted to see the list of EC2 instances that are currently running. Got me? So where I'm running this command, guys, I'm running this command inside a EC2 server, right? But still, it doesn't matter whether I'm running the command in my laptop or I'm running the command inside a EC2 server, doesn't matter, right? You just need a access key, secret access key to connect to the AWS to get the things. Both are same, right? You see, it is complaining that, hey, I don't have any access key, secret access key. Please do configure them. So if you configure like AWS configure, now let me set up the keys. you may get a question that like why I'm running this AWS CLI command inside the EC2. That is the reason I'm spending some time, guys. US East 1. Now let me run the command. You see, since I have got the read-only access, I'm able to get my output now as there is one server already running in my AWS account. The output is in the JSON format by default. The output is showing that each instance metadata in the JSON format. You can see that the image ID, instance ID, the currently instance is running with which type, which key is attached. So whatever the information that you see here, this is exactly the same information that you see in the console after you select the server. Getting me? So here what information that I'm seeing, right? Same information I'm seeing in the CLI mode here in a JSON formatted output since this is a command line. Whenever you add access key and secret access key, it will go to the home directory and it will keep the keys over there. A question for you now. I logged into this instance as root. What is the home directory for root user? /ROT, right? In the home directory, there will be a .aws folder and there will be a file called credentials. And that is where you can see that the credentials are stored in a plain text format, which is not a recommended way. Why? Whoever can see these keys, they can copy the keys and they can use everywhere. Like if you know these keys, right, even you guys can log into my AWS account from your machines as well. As long as the internet is there, the keys will work for you, right? So since the keys are stored in the credentials file, pretty much these keys are permanent, right? Even if you restart the server, nothing will happen. The keys are already there in a file, right? The file is not going to be deleted just like that, right? So these keys are permanent at this time. So you need to set up the keys only one time. Now coming back to here, right? So as I see a question in the chat window, guys, how is it is working for other user? Which user? I'm still using my SM user only, even in my EC2 server, right? So the same set of keys that I set up everywhere. Okay. Now coming to here. So keeping the access key, secret access key in a plain text format is not recommended because everyone can see my keys. So is there any alternative, right? Definitely, if you are trying to logging into your AWS from your laptop or from any other external server, definitely you need to keep the keys. There is no other way. But if you are trying to logging into the AWS or trying to access the AWS from any one of the AWS resource like EC2, just to repeat, if you are trying to access your AWS from any one of the AWS resource like EC2, then rather using AWS access keys on that instance, it is possible to create and attach a IAM role, right? So the role will be granting the same permission whatever you were expecting with the access key, secret access key. The IAM role is the recommended way to grant the permission to the AWS resources to access the AWS keys. The IAM role does not carry any access key, secret access key. IAM role doesn't keep any credentials in your local system. That way, this is more secured way because no one can go and copy something from there. So this is the concept. The IAM role concept you can use only if you are uh, you are trying to access from any one of the resource, not from the user side. Getting me? Now, if I ask you at this time, let's say I'm giving the IAM role to this EC2 server, right? So who is using this IAM role? The IAM role is being used by your EC2 instance to connect it to the AWS. And again, it could be a EC2 instance, it could be any other, right? Your AWS has multiple resources. One resource want to access the another resource of AWS, then it would need a IAM role. Just to clarify this one more time with some other way. You see this diagram, guys. AWS has multiple services, right? So far we talked about EC2, Route 53, today IAM, but there are many other services. Here you can see services like Lambda, Session Manager, API Gateway, RDS, and there are many hundreds of services, right? Right. So a resource of one service want to access a resource of another service. What I'm trying to? That is what I did some time back, right? From the EC2 instance, I'm planning to run a command. That command will go and connect to AWS to access the other resources, right? So if your expectation is one resource want to connect with another resource of AWS, then you can provide that permission with the help of IAM role. So what you do is create a IAM role, attach the IAM policy to the role, what permission that you wanted to give, then that IAM role you give to your EC2 server, then EC2 or any other otherwise. The IAM role I can give to EC2, I can give to Lambda, I can give to RDS, right? Pretty much the concept is if one AWS resource want to access another AWS resource of within AWS, the IAM role can be created and give it there. That's the way of giving the permissions rather using access key and secret access key. I'll show you what does it mean by this. Since I'm I'm planning to run my AWS commands in the EC2 server to access my AWS, right? Keeping the credentials here is not a best practice, so I'm going to delete them. Under root, under .aws folder, I don't want these keys to be. The keys are deleted. Now, if you run the AWS command, let's say AWS EC2 describe hyphen instances, it is complaining that, hey, I don't have keys and I can't connect it to AWS, right? So rather keeping the keys over there, I'll go to the IAM. I'll go to the IAM role tab here. I'll click on create a role. And now here it is asking you that, hey, you want to create a role for whom? That means the role you wanted to attach to whom. In my case, I want to attach a role to a EC2 instance. So let me select AWS service. One service is now trying to access another service within the AWS. That's my requirement. So forget about the other options, whatever you see here. For now, AWS service. Tell that here which service that you wanted to attach a role. I want to attach a role to the EC2. Select EC2 over there, go to next. Tell here what kind of the permission that you wanted to give here. Let's say I wanted to give the EC2 read-only permission. Whatever the permission that you like, it can give here, right? The role name, this is like a EC2 read-only role, correct? That means this particular role will give the read access to the EC2 instances, correct? Create a role. Once the role is created, now you go back to your EC2 server and tell to your EC2 server that, hey, EC2 server, use that role to get a permission. Select the EC2 server, go to actions, go to security, go to modify IAM role and give the role from the drop down here. The role name is EC2 read only role. That is what I created some time back. Update the role. Now you come back to your EC2 server. Now run the command. It is working. So what is that you tried or what is that you achieved some time back by keeping the keys in the .aws folder? Same thing now I'm able to get my AWS command line is working fine. It is able to connect it to your AWS to get the things. But this time there are no keys in my EC2 server. It is getting the access with the help of the role that is being attached to my EC2 server, guys. That is the preferred method to access AWS within your AWS services. Whenever you attach a IAM role to the EC2 server, no matter the commands are being executed from the root or the commands are being executed from the EC2-user or from other user, doesn't matter, it should work. Why? The role is given at a EC2 server level, right? Not for the root user or not for the EC2 user. No, got me? The role is given at a EC2 service, and wherever you run the command, like you logging in using a ordinary user or a root user or another user, doesn't matter, it should work because the role is attached at a server level, not to the specific individual user level. Well, so that's how the IAM role concept works, guys. And for now, just to repeat the concept, right? If you are trying to access the AWS using programmatic way from non-AWS accounts, sorry, like from your local account, from your local laptop, then you use the access key and secret access key. But if you are trying to use the CLI from any one of the AWS service itself, then go with the role concept. This is not a security issue because the purpose itself is to give the access to your EC2 services. So down the line, right, the reason why I given this role is not to run the commands manually by me, right? I want my services, my application should have an access. You will know the reason why this is down the line once we configure something else, like some advanced applications here. Any questions at this time before I move ahead? Now, in the EC2 instances, the AWS command line software is installed automatically, so you don't need to worry. So usually you need to run install AWS CLI command in order to install the AWS CLI software. And you see that the AWS CLI packages are already installed and you don't need to. Why? because by default this AWS CLI software is already installed in the Linux machine and we don't need to worry about it. But for any reason, if this AWS CLI software is not installed, then your AWS commands will not work. You need to install the package. Since this is the AWS provided EC2 server, this AWS CLI software is already installed for you. But let's say I wanted to run AWS commands on my local laptop. You have to install the AWS CLI software manually. So AWS CLI for Windows, right? So we need to get into the AWS documentation and see how to install the AWS CLI software on the machine wherever you wanted to run the AWS commands. Here you can see how to install the AWS CLI software on the Linux systems, Mac systems, Windows systems. Follow these rules, download this particular software and install the software, then only your AWS CLI will work, or else it will not work. In my case, in my local laptop, already the AWS CLI software is installed. That is the reason my commands were working so far. If you are installing the AWS CLI the very first time on your laptops, guys, I would recommend you restart your system after the installation, or else sometimes your installation will not take into the effective. After the restart, definitely it should work. Your AWS commands should work. You should be able to run the commands like AWS hyphen version to see which version of AWS CLI software is currently installed. Good. Now coming back to any questions, do let me know, guys. I said ARN naming convention, right? By default, AWS will be generating one ARN ID for any resource that you create. And this is how the ARN format will be there. You see, ARN colon, maybe, yeah, you see some examples. ARN colon, AWS colon, a service, account ID, user, username. And somewhere you see ARN colon, AWS colon, a service. Then we can see a region as well, in which region it is, if this is a region specific. And then account ID and something like this. That's how it is, guys. Even if you go to your AWS and start looking into any resource that you created, definitely your ARN ID will be appeared. Maybe I'll show this for Route 53. It's not showing in the console, but yeah, definitely there will be a ARN ID created for any resource that you create, right? That's how AWS will be, um, recognizing that particular resource in the backend, guys. Maybe I'll show it for IAM. If I go for admin user, yeah, you see here ARN. This is how it will be appearing for any resource that you created. AWS will use this in a backend to identify this. Well, that's the story. Any questions for me now at this time? If not, I'll give you one other use case. What is this IAM role concept? Because what is the difference between IAM role and IAM user? IAM user will have the access key, secret access key that are being used by a individual human or individual user to configure the keys and run the commands and connect it to your EC2 instances, correct? Maybe I'll ask you a right questions now. I'm running the command called AWS EC2 describe hyphen instances. Now tell me guys, who is running this command? I got output, that is fine. A question for you at this time, who is running this command? So from the AWS perspective, who is running this command? Maybe I want to know who is running this command, right? Let me run one command. AWS STS get hyphen caller hyphen identity. So AWS STS get caller identity. This command will tell by using which credentials it is connecting to the AWS. It is telling that in this machine, whatever the commands that you run, right, the CLI, it is actually using the role. The role name is EC2 read only role. This is the role. That means it is telling that, hey, this role is being used to get a permission to connect to AWS and get the required resources based on the command that you have been executed. Now, if I ask you the same question again, tell me who is running this AWS EC2 describe happen instances command? Is it IAM user? Definitely not, right? I'm not using IAM user here. This command is being run by the IAM role. Now tell me who is using this role? EC2. So EC2 server is using the IAM role and it is gaining that permissions and running the command. What is EC2? EC2 is one of the AWS resource, right? So the IAM role is a concept to grant a permission to access from one AWS resource to another AWS resource. Is it the fine statement, guys? IAM role is a concept, right? The IAM role is the concept which is attached to one of the AWS resource that is providing the access to access any other AWS resources based on the policy that you given. If you give complete policy, it can have access for all the resources. We can restrict it. That's a different case. But if I talk about the IAM user, right? Let me come back to my local system. AWS STS get hyphen caller hyphen identity. I'm running this command on my laptop at this time. You see that it is telling that, hey, SM is the user credentials that are being used here to connect to the AWS. Now if I run, let's say AWS EC2 AWS EC2 describe hyphen instances. If I ask you the question now, who is running this command, guys? This command is being executed by a SM user. Whatever the permissions or policies are attached to this user, accordingly this command will act on. So IAM user is the individual who or any engineer is assigned, right? A specific engineer is actually using the IAM user credentials to run the commands. IAM role is something which is being used by the service. That's the difference. Again, just simply put again, a user, IAM user is for the individual human user. IAM role is for a services, not for the users. Are we good with this again? IAM role is not for a users. IAM user is for the services, a service level access. So far so good. Yeah, I think pretty much that's what it is, right? So I'll talk about the further concepts in IAM in the tomorrow lecture, guys. Right? So it's a very small concept, but since we have went through multiple discussions to make this more clear, we took some time. But yeah, it's a simple concept, right? Just a policy and attached to the users are the roles and control the resources. Okay. We'll talk about IAM role in detailed use cases in tomorrow, and we'll talk about the custom policies as well. Like how do we create our own policy? We'll talk about these scenarios in next lecture. Right? So like as I see a question in the chat window, right? Yes. So we'll see a custom policies in tomorrow and how do we control as per our own requirements rather using the AWS provided policy. As of today, I use the AWS given policy, right? I want to create my own. Yes, possible. So any questions, do let me know, guys. If you have any little confusions, that is still be fine. Those will be get clarified by tomorrow again.
Sir, I have a question. As managing this AWS through console is easy compared to programmatic way, right? Why we are using this AWS CLI? Why we have to go for a programmatic way of managing this AWS?
The AWS CLI will help us to do the automation down the line. When we go to the advanced things, right? So there we need to do some automation in the sense, I'll give you one simple use case at this time. I will ask you that, hey, can you stop the EC2 server at Friday 5 p.m. IST, right? Can you start the server at Monday morning 9 a.m. IST? This is the requirement, okay? The business has this requirement, the company has this requirement. If then, do you log into your AWS management console manually at Friday 5 p.m. and stop the server and log into 9 a.m. Monday and start the server? Then it is a manual. You should be there and log in and do the activity by clicking in the console, right? I don't want that to happen. I want it to be automated in the sense it will take care of automatically to stop and start based on your requirement. Whatever the timeline that you say, it take care of. To do that kind of the automations, right? Then the things has to be implemented in a CLI fashion, or I would say the programmatic way. For that, we need a programmatic way of access, the programmatic way of configuration to deal with this. Got me? Because this is just a command, right? I can use some automation things and I can tell that, hey, this is a command that needs to be executed on this particular time. The command will be run and it will be taken care. Got me? But we'll see how we are going to do all these automations down the line in the upcoming lectures. For your information, at this time, right, we will never ever do anything from AWS console manually in the real time. Don't be scary. Also, we will never do anything from AWS CLI as well. We don't need to learn any of the AWS commands, not required. All the concept what we covered in AWS CLI is for understanding how it will work. We are not going to prepare all these commands. It's very tricky. right? There is a better way to handle these things using Terraform. So we'll talk about the Terraform, which eventually use this CLI concept behind the screen, like programmatic concept. So we'll use the automation stuff there. But yes, we will not do anything from AWS console the way how we are doing as of today. We will do everything from programmatic way only. Hope this is clear. Well, team, I hope you like the today's session, right? And if any questions, go back to the video and probably you'll get more clarity tomorrow as there is some leftover topics in IAM role. All right, look like no questions to me at this time.